Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Veil background information. I'm doing an Angels and Demons profile and we're going to be doing about the demon Beelzebub. Actually you'd be surprised how little information there is regarding this because a lot of it is built up in popular culture and fiction, so yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. As always, I start with a quote from one of my stories where the character is mentioned, then I will give you the background information, the information I have about it, and then I will give you the character profile as it fits into my Beyond the Veil writing universe. So you may hear slight snoring sounds. That's because I've got a very large cat on my bed that's snoring quite loudly at the moment, so don't mind that sound. It's just a cat because they get everywhere. Anyway, let's get on with this. Okay, hard luck, Belial. Don't worry, we know Beelzebub just repeated exactly what you said. But face it, your hoof-licking will never get you to hold a status any higher than the ground compared to Beelzebub. You're not the one Lucifer trusts. Quote from Cruel Temptations. Whether you recognise it as another name for the devil, the title meaning of that book, The Lord of the Flies, or as a corrupting of Baal, as with many other demons, Beelzebub is one of the most recognised alternatives of Lucifer and Satan. Now, my first meeting of any character claiming that name, aside from the devil himself, was in Paradise Lost. In Paradise Lost, Beelzebub is a fallen prince. Beelzebub is a fallen prince alongside Satan, his commander, his second even, perhaps, his friend. And in Book 1, the dialogue that not only describes their entrapment in hell, but leads to Satan's great vision of the place, as well as his choice to go against all good forever, if done through conversing with Beelzebub. It is Beelzebub who remains the more cautioned as they speak, and through his words we see the development of Satan as the anti-hero. Throughout Paradise Lost, they are the counsellor and the advisor, and as much the one to stoke Satan's ego as anyone else. So now, let me quote it. Leader of those armies bright, which but the omnipotent none could have foiled. If once they hear that voice, their liveliest pledge of hope in fears and dangers heard so oft, in worst extremes and on the perilous edge of battle when it raged, in all assaults their surest signal, they will soon resume new courage and revive, though now they lie grovelling and prostrate on yon lake of fire. You're probably now wondering why I started talking about Paradise Lost before anything else with Beelzebub, and that's probably because this certainly has the most bearing on my decisions on how to characterise Beelzebub. Now, within demonology, Beelzebub is counted as the demon of gluttony, often represented as a giant fly or covered and announced with a swarm of flies. Certainly it is from this image of Beelzebub that in ghost hunting and exorcisms, the association of flies swarming into any one area is drawn up. It's curious, particularly because in the Old Testament he is only mentioned once as Beelzebub and god of the Philistine city of Ekron, and that's pretty much it. Depending on his spelling, it is clear to see the link to the constant rival god of the region, Baal, and it is assumed his name translates to Lord of the Flies or Lord of the Flies, and this is where the association comes from. However, his infamy comes from Gnostic texts, traditions, and the Book of Solomon, with most of his demonic links created within demonology. In the Testament of Solomon, one of the non-canonical pieces, Beelzebub is titled as a fallen angelic prince that is deemed linked to the evening star, hence linked to Lucifer. In this text, Beelzebub states his ability to defeat kings through tyranny, cause the worship of demons, steer priests into lust and cities into jealousies, and murders to bring about war. He comes across as the great manipulator, a tempter, but one that cannot be denied, which is amongst the demons that Solomon meets in this tale, and it is often this piece that leads to demonology books, such as the Dictionary Infernal, to refer to him as one of the 7 key princes of hell and demon of gluttony and envy. Unlike some other demons mentioned, Beelzebub is actually referenced in the New Testament in Matthew, but he separates Beelzebub from Satan. In fact, when you read any of it, the demons to possess man are referred to as servants of Beelzebub. He is titled as the Lord of Demons, and yet he is not Satan, though assumedly one of his servants. It speaks again to the reference of Beelzebub perhaps as the Philistine god, and thereby not being the true god, and so demonic, having corrupted people to think of him as a god. But it can also just be that Beelzebub is a name drop for the sake too, and certainly it's played into the link to Beelzebub in possessions. But it is the tradition of him being linked to possessions and even schizophrenia that drives Beelzebub in Christian tradition, and is one of the three main demons. But this is all there truly is to Beelzebub. Just another demon, but with a link to Lucifer and a lofty role in Paradise Lost that has been put into a much more infamous position in common knowledge. As you'll understand, my own interpretation of Beelzebub is hardly inspired by Paradise Lost, and yet in some ways Beelzebub is much more important in Veil to one group I work with in my stories. But generally, when it comes to Beelzebub, a lot of what we know is literally fiction. It's just how he's characterized as another entity, as another form of Satan, or as a follower of Satan, and just really more of a name drop. So here's my profile for him. Name, Beelzebub. Position, fallen angel, prince of hell. Story featured in various with mentions in the Blood Shadow series. Role, grandfatherly role in the Blood Shadow series, but advisor to Lucifer. Gender, agender, although it often takes a male form. Description. Though sometimes described as horned, lofty, and powerful, a being that could not be disputed as God or Lord, more powerful than anything, is the voice of Beelzebub. Some often view him as an opposite number to Metatron. His voice is sometimes charming, sometimes distorted and hideous, sometimes masked with the buzzing of flies, sometimes a whisper, but in whatever place his voice manifests, it is the one that persuades best, that makes you question yourself as if it knows you, is even a part of you, and yet you know it is something else entirely. Most often in hell, they are described as the skull of a ram sitting upon a seeming cloaked figure, but the cloak is made of live buzzing flies. Realm, hell. Abilities: the ability to manipulate, to inspire, to counsel, and also to steer any being to his own goals. To strike jealousy and envy up so the feelings fester. To encourage gluttony as a way to enjoy oneself or punish oneself, and inspire the harm upon another by simply speaking to them. His voice is his greatest ability to tell anyone what to do, and to tell them to be open to be possessed. Master, Lucifer. Personality: wise and thoughtful, Beelzebub could have ruled everything without Satan if they wanted, but they have loyalty and a degree of trust and friendship because they do not wish to be a point of envy or a point to be held responsible. So they stay the advisor, the one to give the good words, and even the one looked to for help by his fellow demons. He likes to be sought, likes to be trusted, likes to be acknowledged, but he has humility unlike other demons. His pleasure at using his voice to harm, though, is always evident, and his cruel streak is insidious, loving to ruin beauty with rot, and make everything fester. He likes inner torment best, and his sadistic nature is so filled in this role in hell that he is often seen as content by other demons. He is a very observant and affectionate parent and grandparent, however. His disease-born offspring are his greatest joy. Relations. Lucifer, his dearest friend in heaven, he admired that Lucifer would speak as if equal to their creator and equal to all of them, that Lucifer would break the rules they seem to accept from existence. He adores Lucifer for giving them somewhere that is theirs alone, and for letting him test the bounds, and yet still use caution to prevent losing the freedom he enjoys most. Raphael. He respects Raphael. He never makes things impossible for Raphael to handle, but he degrades the willingness to try the healing offered. But he almost shares Raphael's content manner and is always the one that can talk. Metatron. He loathes Metatron, firstly for having been human, and secondly for claiming they speak for a power above the power Beelzebub's own voice hails. He considers himself the better to Metatron, and wishes to cull him in battle should he have the chance. Belial. Beelzebub is always amused how Belial envies him, especially because it's so clear that Beelzebub's subservient yet platonic relationship with Lucifer is something pure at its core that cannot be blemished nor broken. If he has a chance to flaunt it in front of Belial, steal his ideas and present them as his own, he will do it purely to feed the envy rotting Belial's form. Gabriel. Often deemed his rival in all things, and yet Beelzebub sees no angel as truly his rival. Beelzebub is rather content not to care for Gabriel at all, and to stand beside him and quibble every thought Gabriel comes up with. He often likes to believe that it was his own questions of whether Gabriel should hold back the good news he had for the demons to extend their punishments, rather than deliver it, that led to Gabriel's own brief exile. Bol, his unfortunate son. Beelzebub loved his son very greatly, but when his son dared to claim himself in a position above that of Lucifer and cause pandemonium on hell, he could not help but join the others in taking out Bol's forces, and steer his beautiful grandchildren to slaughter their father. And he takes it as his position to keep Baal rolling through the infinite tunnel. Malaria, his favourite grandchild, born from the disease he created to feast on blood. Malaria's unique nature compared to her siblings and her desire to change and be amongst humans and protect them from demons, as opposed to the rest of the protozoa that she was made from, lured in Beelzebub. He knew he had a destiny. He knew she had a destiny to her, and was glad to do what he could to help her and her own children enjoy themselves. And he loves her and will do anything for her. History. Created as one of the rare angels of decay, those whose whole purpose was to encourage plants to decay and the insects to feast upon them. The insects of the Lord fascinated him greatly. He began to secretly alter them, creating insects of a seemingly unpleasant nature and feeding off not the plants but the living creatures. Through doing so, he began to turn into a creator of disease, bringing forth the horrific parasites that were lazy and fed off everything. But because they were corrupted creations instead of just living, they brought calamity and death to the creatures as well as disease. When Beelzebub saw what he was creating, somehow it did not shock him, but he found it rather enjoyable, though he wished to create himself. It was because of this desire and sharing an understanding with Lucifer on this need to create and use their powers and be seen and worshipped as they were forced to worship their creator that fueled Beelzebub's charismatic voice that drew other angels to him, particularly the majority of his fellow angels of decay. All of them felt pain that they brought an end to things, and some of the angels of calamitous weather were drawn to his words too. He drew in the crowds, and then Lucifer would speak. Only Lucifer's voice was above Beelzebub's, in its confidence and beguiling nature. Everything about Lucifer beautiful enough to draw them in. Belial also had a wicked tongue, good for convincing, but he could not bring death with his voice as Beelzebub could. Beelzebub and Lucifer soon grew a very firm friendship, and it was obvious that second to Lucifer was Beelzebub, not Belial. Eventually, Lucifer brought death to the Almighty's favoured creation. Death by unnatural means such as murder, accidents from fear, and consequences of their actions. Beelzebub could not help but see this as the proof that Lucifer was on par and equal to the Almighty, and to follow Lucifer was to have the freedom to embrace all the worst capabilities of his own powers. In battle against the host, he made angel wings rot when he touched them with his swarm, and yet in fighting the others, they slashed the skin from his features to make his very own features rot down to skeletal form. And when he was defeated with the others, just as Belial leapt after Lucifer, so Beelzebub turned to the others and told them, "If Lucifer is to reign in a void where all his abilities can be shown and released, then to me that is a kingdom with more opportunity than heaven." Letting himself be thrown and calling to the others to fall with him, and some that were thrown laughed as they fell, because they felt the same. But upon their landing in the core of fire and hideous emptiness, where their original task seemed to make no sense, Beelzebub felt fear and so crawled to Lucifer's side, noticing his master's limp and yet the wicked grin upon their face. The pair debated their next task, and though Beelzebub cautioned subtlety until the world above would be split with those that viewed Lucifer as victim and others as perpetrator, when morality itself could be slapped back into the face of the other angels, he admired the ambition and the power that seemed to erupt from Lucifer as he granted them all new positions and new powers. As the second most powerful in hell, Beelzebub is the demon that all other demons must bow to, and the other lords must consult for an appointment to see Lucifer. He monitors their work and gives reports upon it to Lucifer, barely going out into the world himself, but creating all kinds of maladies to make mankind suffer. He breeds the other demons that stir him, siring many of the creatures to roam the vale, but being held the sire of the blood drinkers and the grandfather of vampires and werewolves, for he is deemed to have created the curse to set them all hungering for human flesh. He can be spoken to, reasoned with, but only by those who are true to themselves, because only in the most purest of forms can he find no way to corrupt them. Beelzebub had been at the root of many problems in the world, and he loves it. Final comments. Beelzebub is a strange figure. He is truly horrible to everyone that isn't in his close circle, and his voice, yeesh, it is the worst. Also, If any of you know a transformer called Tarn, I tend to think Beelzebub is a sort of having same kind of horrifying presence as Tarn, but that's because I'm a nerd.